I think underneath everything, there was this inner desire, you know, to chase sort of the success that he never got to show his father that he could achieve. And I think in a lot of ways, there was this interesting parallel path that we always sort of arced out where it was like Dale Sr. was chasing success at all costs, right? And it took him away from his family. And Dale Jr. is chasing success to bring him closer to his father. Um, and I think that was something that sort of maybe in a way he inherited too, this sort of notion of trying to, and maybe we all do, this idea of trying to really win our parents' praise and affection, and to show them what we can achieve.
Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion even a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, David Parro.
And I'm Tim McGee.
We are in front of Memorial Day holiday weekend here in the United States, a weekend especially made for motorsports with three of the biggest racing events on the calendar, all happening this weekend, and our guest this week ties into that as well. But I'll throw it over to you first, Tim. What's on your mind?
Well, something we didn't talk about last week that came out, Rob Manfred, Commissioner of Major League Baseball, recently announced that, among others, Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, along with the other so-called 8 men out from the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal, have been reinstated. Their names have been removed from the permanently banned list. In citing the reasons, one of the things that Manfred said was, with their passing, they can no longer bring, and I'm paraphrasing here, they can no longer bring shame upon the game. So this has really big implications specifically for Shoeless Joe and Pete Rose, because now that they are no longer on the permanently banned list, they are eligible to be considered for entry into the Hall of Fame. So I think that's pretty big news in the world of sports.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this and really wanting to get your view on it, because there will be a vote coming up at the end of this year for the 2026 class for the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think Shoeless Joe will be an automatic. I'm suspecting Pete might be. His stats clearly suggest he should be a Hall of Famer. He was one of the greats. There's no doubt about that. But the implications of betting on a sport versus, say, performance-enhancing drugs, which would, obviously are affecting other people's perception of people like Bonds and McGwire, Roger Clemens, et cetera, Sammy Sosa. I'm curious as to what people are going to do when it comes time to vote. And since you've had, in your role on the Naismith Award board as chairman, you have to vote. You vote for these things. I mean, how do you think people are going to go? What do you expect to happen now that Pete Rose, who died last year at 83, does he go in? And how does this factor in? A lot of people have come to me and said, I did it again. A lot of people have said that they ultimately just couldn't deal with the hypocrisy of taking so much money from the gambling industry, and that it does look like a bit of double standards. I don't agree with that position, by the way. I think gambling on your sport when you're playing it or coaching it is as bad of a thing as you can possibly do. So I get it. I agree with the move, and I do think that Pete Rose and certainly Shoeless Joe Jackson should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think they will both be elected, because my understanding is they're not voted on every year like eligible players who are retired for 5 years or more. I think they're only voted on by the Veterans Committee every couple of years. I could be wrong on that, but I do think that next time that they are up, they will both be voted in. And here's why. Number one, this idea of gambling being a big part of sports now, although it is still illegal and against the rules to bet on your sport. But I will say this about Shoeless Joe: from everything that I've read, there is a serious question about whether or not he truly threw the series, right? He batted over 350, I believe, and played flawlessly in the field. So there's some question. And Shoeless Joe Jackson was famously very uneducated, very sort of naive and unsophisticated. He was from the backwoods of South Carolina. Was just from everything I've read, just a prodigious baseball talent. So there is some question about him, but I also think that he has the benefit of time, right? That's been over 106 years at this point since that occurred. Pete Rose, slightly different story on the merits of his playing career. There's no question. He's the all-time hits leader, member of the Big Red Machine, won with both the Phillies and the Reds. Um, again, the thing that would hold him back is number one, he bet on his own team, albeit to win, and number two, he never really showed contrition
Right.
during his lifetime. And in fact, he was one of the most prolific autograph signers. And I'm a memorabilia and trading card guy. He was one of the most prolific autograph signers. And there was a period of time where he would put an inscription on all of his autographed baseballs, "I bet on baseball," which was, I think, rubbed a lot of people in the sport the wrong way because he was cashing in on his malfeasance. So
yeah, I do think it's been an interesting one. What I haven't understood is he didn't bet. He bet for his team. He didn't bet against his team. I think once you're betting on your sport, you become extremely vulnerable. So I like the rule, but the pressures are there, and certainly there is so much money being spent within the sports betting industry into sports that there is a certain hypocrisy about it, and I totally get why people see that in that way for sure. But yeah, 8 Men Out, great movie. It's what most of us know about the Black Sox scandal. And in that movie, they very clearly make Shoeless Joe look good. I don't know how accurate all that is. I haven't, looked into that that much. And it certainly makes Kennesaw Mountain Landis look like a total tool in the Lifetime ban that he dished out. Anyway,
yeah,
good movie
yeah,
if anyone hadn't seen it.
Yeah, John Sayles directed, John Cusack, D.B. Sweeney, David Strathairn. I think I'm saying his name right. But you asked me,
what? That's some deep knowledge on that. I mean, I knew all the actors once you said them, but you're whipping them off.
Yeah,
wow.
He played Eddie Seacott.
Oh yeah,
the pitcher, the pitcher.
Yeah. Right. I could have hit him, by the way. The
yeah.
movie character. He wasn't throwing that good of stuff.
In the
movie.
And John Sayles, the director, who I used to see on the bus going from Hoboken to New York fairly regularly. He lived in Hoboken for many years. He actually played the sports writer Ring Lardner in the movie. Another trivia. But you asked me about my role on the Naismith Award, and in all the time I've been on the voting academy, I've never had to vote for a player where there was any question about his behavior. But there have been times where there have been Coach of the Year nominees who have been tainted by scandal, and you have to, there's nothing in the criteria that says you do or do not have to take that into account in your voting. But it's I'm sure there will be some voters who weigh it all, and there will be some voters who simply look at Shoeless Joe Jackson and Pete Rose's performance and statistics on the field and vote. And that's it'll be interesting to see. My guess is they will both get it.
Yeah. All right. I want to move to another subject. Sportico came out with its 50 top valuations of soccer clubs, football clubs around the world. 19 MLS teams are on this list, more than any other league. That includes Premier League, Bundesliga, Serie A, etc., La Liga. I'm a little bit dubious on this, if I'm being honest. But
why?
Because I'm not dubious on the valuations, but what it does say is a well-managed approach by Don Garber and the team at MLS by creating a good, balanced valuation across the league with their, kind of single ownership situation that they have. But just keep in mind, so LAFC is the top club in MLS at 1.28 billion. Now, keep in mind that Real Madrid of La Liga is the top at 6.53 billion. So there's a pretty big disparity there. I mean, because we're talking billions. So the difference there is quite high. And the top five are all over 5 billion. and MLS's top is 1.28. Inter Miami, 1.19. LA Galaxy, 1.11. Atlanta United, 1.08. So you can see the tightness of those. So I think it's a good thing, but it's not necessarily reflective of when you see 19 of the top 50 teams, and no other league having that, of the global impact of the top clubs. Because I don't think anyone on MLS side has necessarily broken that yet. And this isn't knock. I'm not trying to dump on MLS here.
I don't know the criteria by which they were measured, I'm sure they were very comprehensive in measuring this. I hearken back to my days as a finance major in business school. The price of a stock is the net present value of all expected future cash flows. So if you look at the other leagues, all of which are much more mature, part of the future cash flow, there's a lot more room for growth in the future cash flow of MLS clubs. Growth, not absolute numbers, but growth. So that might impact the value of these clubs.
No, I think that's interesting. And that's the second point that I wanted to make on this. Do you remember a few years ago, Tim, when earnings per share actually meant something in business?
Yeah, back before the dot-com bubble of 25 years ago, yes.
But there is still a concept. So even if you look at the big tech companies that might seem overinflated from an earnings per share, or in this case, look at it revenue compared to valuation.
Well, I think what you're not, you don't really mean earnings per share. And my God, I'm starting to break out into a sweat remembering this. You're talking more about PE ratio, price to earnings.
I'm using that as a comparison.
Okay.
To something that we used to hold a little dear in business that is similar to what I think you're seeing. And it supports what you're saying. And again, it's not wrong. It's where we are. But MLS on a revenue to valuation disparity is way above any of the other sports leagues and way above those tech companies that we used to say, come on, how are these valuations so high? And so that's being celebrated. And I ask you, is that something that should be that celebrated? I'm not saying it's wrong. I agree with you. I think that people are investing in MLS because they see a huge growth future. And I think that's great. I think it's great to move this league up in the looking at the overall roster of top leagues around the world and pushing it up because investors are seeing opportunities. What I wonder about is, are some of these investments short-term, particularly with equity groups, et cetera, and investment groups that'll be a little more short-lived before they realize the opportunities in front of them?
Yeah, every expansion franchise that the league has sold has gone for more than the one before. So the most recent one was San Diego, which went for $500 million. I have a friend who is part of an investor group that is looking to get the next expansion club when Don and the league ultimately decide they want to expand beyond 30 clubs. This person told me they expect to pay between $600 and $700 million for that next club. Now that was last year. If the league doesn't expand for a couple more years, that number could very well go up. So right off the bat, you have a baseline of 500 million, right? That your club is worth because that's what you paid for it. So that upside comes from the cash flows from the media deal, the sponsorships, ticket revenues, and other revenue streams, merchandise, and things like that.
Listen, a lot of people smarter than I am, Gordon Kane, who knows the sport inside and out, past guest, Camilla Durano, have celebrated this, and I've seen their posts on this story. And I do think it's a credit to the league for creating an atmosphere of interest, intrigue, and investment that has helped push this. And I hope it continues to move forward and these teams, do achieve something great and this league moves up in the, on that list.
Listen, of course they're going to celebrate it. I don't know I think Gordon may have left the San Jose club but he's obviously biased, and Camilo is clearly biased. I'm not saying they're wrong. So that excitement comes from that bias. And again, not to say that they're wrong, but I think that the league will continue to grow. There's no doubt about it. There is talk that they are going to move their season to align more closely with the global FIFA calendar, which will make things more streamlined when it comes to the transfer window and things like that. But I have said this. I have said this since David Beckham came to the league in 2007, 2008. The league will not have truly arrived until players like Thierry Henry and Beckham and Wayne Rooney and Busquets and Messi, and the list goes on and on and on of international players, until they come to the league in the ascendancy of their career and not in the last couple of years of their career. That, to me, will be when the league has truly made it. And it just doesn't have the financial wherewithal to do that at this time.
But they have those valuations.
True. And so if you're looking to invest in a sports club, a professional sports team, you certainly would want to look at MLS because of the upside potential. And I'm just going to get out in front of it. If I got any description of whether it's PE ratio or the definition of what makes up a stock price, let's just say, okay, you're right, I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but.
No, that's definitely not the case. I mean, come on, that was how you started your career.
I know, but by the same token, there's a reason I'm a sports marketer now.
Listen, it was funny because as I was looking at this story for this, and I saw this bit about revenue to valuation and how MLS was really like the highest by a lot. And I'm going, wait a minute, this reminds me of the old earnings per share. And yeah, that's really important. You have to have that backing up, have your valuation. I mean, all that's gone out the window, clearly.
Right.
Anyway.
And the price to earnings ratio is also an apt comparison, because, the price of the stock, in this case, the price of the organization relative to the earnings of the organization, is pretty high. I don't know what, and so the term that you hear when a club is sold is multiple. At what multiple is it sold? At what multiple is the sales price to, whether it's total earnings, EBITDA, free cash flow, whatever it happens to be. And there are benchmarks that buyers use to determine what is fair value of an asset they're going to purchase.
Yeah, we got it. My eyes are clouding over. So let's move on.
All right.
Let's hit a couple more before we take a break.
Yeah. So we had opening weekend last weekend for WNBA. Some great stories. First of all, Fever, Chicago Sky. The Fever won by 30 plus. The rivalry, and I use that term with air quotes, between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese was renewed. I think rivalries are more between teams than between players. I'll say a couple things about that. Number one, I don't like the comparison between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese being like Magic and Bird. Not yet. Let's see them accomplish something for their teams where we start to make those comparisons. But I will say this: the league is investigating racial epithets and taunts that were directed at Angel Reese after that game. There is no place for that in sport whatsoever. I think we can all agree on that. I do like the way that Angel Reese handled herself after the game when asked about the hard foul that Caitlin Clark committed against her. She was going up for a basket. I think Angel Reese said something to the effect of, basketball, move.
Got the call right.
Move on.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. But we had some amazing ratings this weekend coming out of the opening weekend. As I'm looking at my notes here that I took before we got on. First of all, Paige Becker's debut, 121% increase on the Ion broadcast. 639,000 fans watching.
I'm seeing 2.7 million on that ABC matchup between the Sky and Fever. Peaked at 3.1. That's incredible.
Yeah. And it was a blowout. So people are staying tuned in.
But people, well, listen, the Fever obviously are they're going to be a lot better this year, it looks like.
Much improved team. Yeah.
The Fever also launched the first direct-to-consumer streaming service they call Fever Direct, powered by Endeavor Streaming. So that's an exciting development. We'll see if they will follow that story, over the season and see if it's getting some traction.
I know you want to talk about NBA ratings, but before we move on to that, one quick thing about the WNBA. We've talked about Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports on this show before. I think you and I both agree, not our cup of tea, either him individually or as a media outlet. But then again, we are not the target audience for that. But pretty ballsy move by Dave Portnoy. He bet $25,000 on Caitlin Clark to have a triple-double in that opening game. And she did, and he won $350,000.
Well, listen, here's what Portnoy is he knows how to create, and he really started this way. This is how it broke big, is on the content side. And he does things that are easy to capture in social bits, and he jumps on and talks about it, and that's something that his followers will jump on. So yeah, interesting movie. He loves talking about investment. He loves talking about sports betting. Yeah, you can't deny the success that this guy has had, and he certainly captured something in the zeitgeist to at least certainly to his audience. And he needs something to do because his Celtics are out of the playoffs now because the Knicks beat him. Did you stay up for the game last night?
I did.
Unbelievable. One of the best NBA games I've ever seen. I mean, heartbreaking if you're a Knicks fan, but just an absolute gold for the NBA. Gold, I tell you, Jerry. So I don't know the viewership numbers, but it had to be good. The Game 6 Knicks win over the Celtics to seal that deal and put them into the to the semis averaged 5.73 million on ESPN, which was a 14% increase from their previous series, which was the same series last year. So you look at these games now. OKC finishes off Denver. I predicted that series might go 7. It did, by the way. It looks like OKC.
I love how you say it might. No guts, no glory, David.
Dude. I sense that OKC may roll over Minnesota here. We'll see.
They look good in the first game.
And
they're clearly the best team in the league all season.
I think the NBA has so much going for it. These games are really great. So you can say what you will about the NBA during the regular season. This is thrilling basketball. And people that are sports fans should take it in because not only is the athleticism off the chart, but the drama is quite amazing. And that shot by Halliburton to tie it, which we thought won it for the Pacers, was like the Tiger shot at the Masters with the ball hanging at the cup and then spinning in. It went up and dropped back down. It was, and then the Pacers went on, of course, to win in OT. But
yeah, that was hard. That was heartbreaking. But I want to say two things about Tyrese Halliburton. He was voted by his fellow players in an anonymous poll the most overrated player in the NBA. I just do not. There's got to be some jealousy there. That kid is not overrated by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think I did not, and I say this as a Knicks fan, right? But I also say it as a basketball fan. I do not like him emulating with the choke move Reggie Miller. First of all, you know, as a Knicks fan, I hate Reggie Miller, but I respect the hell out of him. There's only one guy who could do that, number one. And number two, Tyrese Halliburton did not have the presence of mind to make sure he was behind the three-point arc. So it wasn't even a game-winning shot.
No.
It tied the game.
It was a silly move. I wrote immediately to my son-in-law, who is from Indianapolis area, and we were texting back and forth during the game. And it was really a remarkable comeback by the Pacers in the fourth quarter. But I said, don't think he should have done that. don't think he should have done that. He goes, definitely should not have done that. So
It
I
may
think
wait-
even from that side, it was.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be up in the locker room in Madison Square Garden. Why they were up by what, 16, something like that, almost 20, with a few minutes to play. You've got Jalen Brunson with 5 fouls. Why not take him out? Why not put in somebody who's a little bit pressure for defensive purposes? They just, I don't know.
They did kind of choke it. I mean, I'm not saying that Halliburton was right to do it, but they did kind of choke that lead. They started playing sloppy and they played nervous, and I think that happens in big competitions like this, and we'll see how they respond.
It's Draymond Green was on the broadcast in this the halftime and post game show, and one of the things he said was that I forget which opponent he was talking about, but the Warriors, and it was not a very good team. It was a team that didn't even make the playoffs. I can't remember who it was, but the Warriors lost a 20-point lead with two minutes and change left. And his point was, it's the NBA.
It's the NBA. Great line. Great line.
So yes, should the Knicks be able to close that out and hold it? Absolutely. Is it choke? I don't call it a choke, because I do want to give credit to the Pacers. Just not. I mean, Nesmith was just lights out.
Listen, Nesmith, and you made comments about, like, he was video gaming last night. It was even more than Steph. He was just like jumping up and throwing threes in. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
But yeah, I want to go back to the Halliburton thing, because I agree. Halliburton definitely shouldn't have done it. I think he realized it. If you caught his post-game interview, I thought he handled it pretty well. He didn't necessarily apologize, but he's like, got in the moment. People have been talking about doing. I think Reggie's been baiting him. I don't like this broadcast team, by the way. Stan Van Gundy is a freaking basketball genius.
Yes,
he called everything right. They should do this. They should do that, and they played everything, including they should just hand the ball to Karl Anthony Towns,
which they did.
Reggie was great. I'm not knocking Reggie as a player. He was amazing, but.
I think there are plenty of other players they could have had as the third person on that broadcast team. I do like Kevin Harlan. I did like Stan Van Gundy.
I don't like him on basketball. Don't like him on basketball. No.
Okay. All right. But I do think they could have found somebody else instead of Reggie Miller, just because he's going to be a homer. And listen, I don't complain. I'm not like, ready to throw something at the TV because he wasn't a total homer, but they could have found somebody.
Right. Okay, we're getting geeked up on fandom right now because this playoffs have been great. So let's definitely get to a break, as we have an incredible guest coming up, and then we'll close out the show. Be back soon.
It's time for our guest.
We are back and very excited about our guest this week. Joshua Altman is an American film director, producer, writer, and an award-winning director of photography and editor. He made his directorial debut with All These Sons and was the editor of Minding the Gap, along with numerous critically acclaimed films, including 2 Sundance Grand Jury Prize winners. And now he has directorial credit for the Amazon Studios docuseries Earnhardt, a 4-part series that I really believe will be considered an important part of sports history. First 2 episodes released today, Thursday, May 22nd, and the final 2 will be released next week on May 29th. Joshua, welcome. We are very excited to have you.
Thank you very much for the kind intro, and thank you for having me.
I got a chance to take a look at the screening of this, and I'm excited for other people to see it. So we're just going to dive right in. I mean, you've taken on a rather daunting challenge here, taking a comprehensive and unbiased look at one of the more complicated, perhaps misunderstood figures in recent sports history. That's Dale Earnhardt. So give us an overview of how this project came about. Why was it something that you really wanted to be a part of?
Sure. So my good friend Dan Lindsay came to me about 2 years ago, maybe longer than that now. Dan is the EP of the series, an incredible filmmaker in his own right. He did LA 92 and Undefeated, which they won an Oscar for, and Tina. And he came and he pitched me this idea about Dale Earnhardt. He really said initially, what do you know about Dale Earnhardt? And at the time, I knew very little. I was like, I know he's a race car, driver. I remember he had a big mustache, and that's kind of like it. I didn't really know any of the story there. And that day, I remember he pitched me sort of the circumstances leading up to 2001. He set the stage for me and how that tragedy unfolded on the track. And I was hooked. I went home and I started researching and watching stuff. The editor in me was initially, sort of looking at the footage and like, wow, look at all this stuff that just exists on YouTube. And then after that, quickly the same night, I started watching interviews of Dale Earnhardt Jr. And that's really what sunk its teeth into me. Just the way in which he was vulnerable and honest, his candor. It just talked to me in a way that I didn't see coming. It's not what I expected from a NASCAR driver, especially not of the son, Dale Earnhardt, that I had just been learning about. Yeah, and I was like immediately like, yeah, let's do this.
Almost a Greek tragedy, if you think about it. Josh, not sure how much you want to give away now in advance of the launch of the series, but it's a question you attempted to tackle in the film. What drove Dale Earnhardt Sr.? What do you think? And you've studied him now, you've looked at films, listened to interviews, put together this great movie. What do you think drove him?
That is definitely something I think that the series unpacks in a way that I can't probably put words to quite as well as some of the people in the film, especially, the people who knew him well. We did these great interviews with both, the close friends of his, such as, you guys talked about his Wrangler sponsor, David Allen beforehand. Like David Allen sat down with us and gave us some incredible insight, as well as his friend Hank Parker. I think, listening to the two of them, as well as his sisters, Kathy and Kay, talk about it, I think underneath everything, there was this inner desire to chase sort of the success that he never got to show his father that he could achieve. And I think in a lot of ways, there was this interesting parallel path that we always sort of arced out, where it was like Dale Sr. was chasing success at all costs, right? And it took him away from his family. And Dale Jr. is chasing success to bring him closer to his father. And I think that was something that sort of maybe in a way he inherited too, this sort of notion of trying to, and maybe we all do, this idea of trying to really win our parents' praise and affection, and to show them what we can achieve.
Yeah, there's no doubt the universality of that message, I think, is going to resonate quite well. I have to say, I was so excited to see that David Allen was featured in this. He's a good friend and a former co-worker of mine. I won't say the whole bit, but the bit that when asked, I don't know if it was Richard, I guess it was Richard asking, what do we do? Because Dale was wrecking people, and he had a very, very funny response to that back in the day. But that was so very much David Allen. Again, so many great little bits here. What was the biggest surprise from the making of this that you learned, and what surprises do you think those that watch this will see?
I guess it depends on how you're coming into it. Like, we all came in as NASCAR newbies, right? And again, like I tend to find myself gravitating towards projects where I don't know much about the story, where I don't come in as a fan. I don't know why. It's just sort of my nature, and I find myself like a sponge absorbing all this stuff. And then the idea is like, now to communicate that to people outside of the sport, or people who know whatever the world is that I'm telling. At the same time, you want to honor and make sure that the people who know the story don't feel like you're getting things wrong. So that was important for us. And I think, one of the things that I took away coming in as an outsider, we knew initially sort of the level of success that Dale had achieved. We knew that he was, both became the face of the sport, that he was this 7-time champion. What I didn't really understand until we dove into the project and we started really talking with people, business wise, the guy was so savvy. He was able to understand and see, that he needed to take control of his name, image, and likeness before that was even a thing. And to do so in a way where it didn't just benefit him, but the other drivers in the sport, to take, his rival, Jeff Gordon under his wing and bring that up, and to do all that with a 9th grade education is profound. I don't know anybody who sort of, has that. And, we see him very much as an American icon who should be seen on the same level as, Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, and even someone like Elvis, that he is someone who should be looked at and revered like that. And, the hope is that other people take that away from the film, the series.
Sensibly, you had the support of people who knew Dale Sr. best, his family, his sponsors, his race teams, and so forth. What was it like working with the Earnhardt family, particularly Kelly and Dale Jr.?
It was incredible. I couldn't have asked for a better collaboration. I knew beforehand, again, like from watching videos of Dale speak, that he was going to be, candid and honest. I didn't know the level of the level of trust that they put into us to tell this story, and was not, was just incredible. And I think, I came away from it really, we sat down initially with Dale Jr., let's say we had a 2-hour block schedule, and we ended up talking for 4 hours. That nothing was off limits. They were willing to share everything. Both him and Kelly really opened up themselves in a way that I didn't see coming, as well as did the extended, the other rest of their family. And they're all so down to earth, like salt of the earth people still, despite the level of success, that the family has, and the recognition that they have within the sport.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I think Dale Jr. is an absolutely fascinating character, and what you were able to get, and what this film, I think, was able to get from them as to what this all meant. And there's an honesty about it that I found extremely interesting. I also want to say one of the other things that David mentioned to me, David Allen, was just how impressed he was with the level of work in detail that was going into making sure that the story was told in the proper way. Okay, how challenging was it to cover the entirety of this man, particularly knowing that the story had this tragic ending in February of 2001?
It was very challenging. Initially we had started to conceive of this, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be a film or a series. I wasn't sure how much people would be willing to sit down and watch, specifically people who aren't fans. And as we really started to lay out the story in terms of how many episodes it was, we ended up writing a 56-page deck, and it was pretty clear, okay, this is not going to fit into 2 hours. So, it ended up being even over 4 hours. Our initial thing was, okay, we'll make 4 1-hour episodes, and even some of those one of those ended up being longer, and they had to be to contain sort of the breadth of this. But, we had access from NASCAR to 15 petabytes of material that they had over the course of film, everything that they've captured. And for us, we didn't even know what a petabyte was, but coming into it, it was like, okay, we are the kind of filmmakers who don't just want the clips. We want the handles of that. We want to know the moment he sits down in the chair, before he thinks the camera's rolling, and everybody else, all those little bits and pieces. So we ended up absorbing 10,000 hours of footage. And to compress that down to 4 hours, and getting all these stories, there's obviously some things that end up on the cutting room floor, but for the most part, I think, the story sort of starts at a certain point, tell us what it wants to do and what it wants to be. And yeah, we had the most incredible team, from our editors to our AEs, who were really able to sort of sift through that stuff and figure out, what was the most important piece of this puzzle? What could we not leave behind? What did we need to tell this story?
Two-part question. How would you describe Dale Sr.'s legacy? And do you think that Earnhardt, the docuseries, will change that in any way in people's minds, fans or non-fans?
Yeah, I don't know what it'll change in people's minds. I'll say that I asked that question about legacy to everyone I sat down with. It was kind of like just sort of an inherent part of this project, right? How could you not ask about this man's legacy? I'd like to think that the series, for people who are outside of it, will shed light on, again, making it clear that this guy is an American icon. He was the gravitational center of the family, but he was also the gravitational center of the sport, which is, unparalleled. And I think, in a lot of ways too, the first race that we went to was at North Wilkesboro, just to walk as spectators, and to go there and to still see flags of number 3 and bumper stickers with number 3. I don't think any other sport has that person. There's nobody that is present still today, who has passed away that long ago, that has that connection to people, that has that fandom.
Tim, you know the old joke, right? How they count in North Carolina: 1, 2, Earnhardt, 4, 5.
That is great.
All right. The tagline of the series is, when racing is everything, you'll sacrifice anything.
Yeah.
Can you describe how that plays out over the course of the 4 episodes?
Sure. I think, again, we really paint this picture as a much in a way chronologically. We do go back in time to, you know, Ralph and stuff in episode 1, but really the idea is that this is a time machine. We're taking back people, you know, with all of this footage that we have, this treasure trove of archive, and really transporting them back, you know, to the late 70s all the way through the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, Dale Sr. starts off, I mean, you mentioned Greek tragedy before. It really does feel that way in a sense where, you know, it starts off in a way where this man is just hell-bent on achieving at all costs and really sacrificing everything, his family, no matter what, anything to get to this level of success. And subsequently, you know what I mean, starting to really sort of, you know, ruffle some feathers along the way. But, you know, becoming a father again with Taylor, sort of opening his mind up, and later on, you know, as Junior starts to become up in the ranks, you know, really embracing that. And there is this transformation that happens with him, you know, where he starts to really understand this value of family, you know, embracing it, becomes this changed man. And the tragedy of it all is that that happens just, you know, years before he's sort of taken from us. And so, you know, I think that is something that, you know, people will come to connect with. I mean, it really is it's a scripted film in a lot of ways, you know, I feel like, in a way that it played out.
February 2001. It's the end of Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s life, but it's not the end of the story by any means. So what was some of the lasting impact that Dale Sr. had on the sport, on his family, on the zeitgeist, if you will, of celebrity? What's changed since then?
You know, I don't know the sport well enough to tell you guys how it's changed or where they are today in terms of his legacy. I'll say that, you know, his impact, you know, he cast this enormous shadow, specifically over his, you know, family. Much of the 4th episode is about that, right? Is about Dale Jr. and Kelly sort of figuring out how to come up under that shadow without him there. Grappling with, you know, the man who made every decision. You know, multiple people had told us, you know, if you walked in a room and you were going to have dinner, like he was like, sit there, sit there, sit there, like that level of control. And, you know, to sort of grapple with that and everybody sort of pick up the pieces, you know, was a daunting task. To know that Dale and Kelly sort of achieved the success that they had. And were able to build their own legacy, I think is pretty incredible, you know, in the weight of that. Yeah, I don't know, does that answer your question?
Well, there's one other piece to that too, of course, because there hasn't been a death in NASCAR, and previous or around the time, I mean, Kenny Irwin had died. Neil Bonnet, one of his best friends, had died in a test.
Adam Petty.
Practice session, Adam Petty. So, and there haven't been since then. And I don't want to get into the, you know, to the issue of, you know, the equipment there, but there have been changes and some things that have been, I think, ramped up from a safety standpoint since that, that hopefully has prevented it. Because, and you cover this in the film, Chocolate Myers is spoken to, and I remember it. I remember exactly where I was, Josh, when that wreck happened. I wasn't at the race, but I was watching at my then home in Northern Virginia. And it didn't look that bad. I've seen way more. I've seen plenty of wrecks that looked worse than that. That's what I think one of the pieces that was so shocking. But clearly there have been some safety measures and some things that are more required now, I think, that have been installed since his tragic death.
I mean, that nobody has died in a cup race since says a lot. You know what I mean? That his death became this sort of, I think, inciting moment for the sport to be like, this cannot happen again, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that you were watching that. You know, we have it. I forget as an outsider, you know, the way that moment impacted people, whether they were old enough of age to see it actually on screen, or a child watching their parents go through it, you know?
10 years later, I saw footage of Richard Childress, who was the team owner at the time, trying to raise Dale on the radio after the crash and couldn't do it. And it was just so heartbreaking to, you know, to your point, David, it didn't look like a bad crash, but when you saw that moment, you sensed that something was horribly wrong.
Yeah. There were a couple bits you did capture, the video of the first person that came in and looked in the car You could tell the reaction was not good. Ken Schrader coming over to Michael Waltrip in victory lane, because that was this unbelievable first wins. There's so many things going on in that moment with Dale Jr. Right in front of his father, and Michael Waltrip, who ended up getting his first win in the Daytona 500, who was racing for DEI at the time. Just amazing stuff. And you piece all that stuff together. So cool. The whole bringing Michael onto the team and how that, played with his brother. I'm not going to go into that because people need to see this. And with that, I want to give you an opportunity to tell us again, when does everything air? Are there any social media channels or social channels anyone should be following for information?
Yeah, I mean, I think following out Dale Jr. probably is like the way to go for everything. He's the source of guidance there. The series drops today. It's live now, which is kind of crazy to go up on Amazon Prime, and it's big logo right there at the top. So that's pretty exciting, after all this time putting it together. And then the next 2 episodes drop May 29th.
I cannot wait to see it. I'm queuing it up now as we speak. I've got the TV behind me.
Yeah.
Chuck, before we let you go, we do ask questions of all our guests, and we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, especially because you come to this industry from a very, very different perspective from most, if not all, of our other guests. What one piece of advice would you have for somebody who's looking to break into your area of the entertainment business, namely filmmaking?
I mean, it's probably similar to sort of any other industry. I think you kind of just need to have that tenacity and not give up, and don't be afraid, from failure. I think it's one of those things that you grow and learn from every time you fail. You know what I mean? So pick yourself back up and keep going after it,
Thank you.
That's great. Josh, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to meet you. It was a real pleasure to speak with you and get your insights on this film that you've just put together. And again, I'm telling everybody that I see or talk to, not just listeners of this, they need to watch this. It's a great piece.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate that.
Your canvas is filled with lots of shapes and lots of stars.
We are back, and thank you again to Josh Altman. His docuseries Earnhardt launches today on Amazon Prime Video. I can't wait to watch it. But now is the point in the show where we take a look forward. David, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I want to go back somewhat to the discussion with Josh, and this is the racing weekend. This is a motorsports weekend to me, and I'm going to focus most things on that. First, quick shout out to Ray Stallone, one of my first bosses, the SID at DePaul, when I took an assistant SID job. He was the one that reached out to see if we were interested in speaking with Joshua, and he's a publicity man extraordinaire. And Ben Brown, who's the publicity principal at Amazon Studios. Just want to thank both for helping get us that great interview with Josh. All right, Coke 600, Charlotte, Sunday night, Indy 500, noon Eastern time on Sunday, IndyCar, and Monaco Grand Prix, 9 a.m. Sunday. It's just an amazing day of racing, and there is so much drama being placed on particularly the Indy 500 this year. So I did want to talk about that. Only the 3rd rookie ever to win the pole, so I'm very excited to see this. Robert Schwartzman, a Russian-Israeli driver, first time in a long time that a rookie has been on the pole since 1983, Teo Fabi. Schwartzman is only 25. He's part of Ferrari Driver Academy, so who knows where this guy's career is going to go. Fox's first Indy 500, and they're putting a lot behind this. So much so that their broadcast team includes Tony Stewart, no surprise, Danica Patrick, no surprise. Both of those have raced both Indy and NASCAR, and of course, Tom Brady. So I'm very much looking forward to Tom Brady's racing insights, but he is a GOAT of football, so why not? And they paid a lot of money for him. So I think it's going to be great. Fox has a lot of things going for it this year because they've lifted the local TV ban. around central Indiana, which they've had in place for a long time, but they expect 350,000 people to be on site. It's going to be a huge spectacle. So a lot of things working in favor of IndyCar. But Penske, which owns the Speedway, which owns IndyCar, their race operation got penalized big for cheating. So there's a scandal there. Two of their top drivers.
I don't know if you read, they fired their president and somebody else.
So Roger came out and fired almost all of the top brass of the racing operation, which included people that have been in that operation for a long time. Tim Cindric and Ron Rzuski, and others. And I saw an interview actually with Roger talking about it, and he's taking accountability. But listen, when you own every piece of this thing, I do think they're going to have to look at some changes. It did get caught. Will Power and Joseph Newgarden will start from the back of the field. I was going to predict Newgarden to win again, but that's not going to happen, I don't think. But yeah, big scandal, and I think that Penske is going to have to look at some independent, operation to do the inspections, both pre and post race. Moving on, so big racing weekend. So I wanted to kind of start there.
Also a big lacrosse weekend. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, there. So yeah, I can see what you're doing. Your Bill Belichick impersonation as well, with that thing being all torn up. I guess you've had that for a while.
Yeah, quite some time. Cornell will be playing Penn State, and Syracuse will be playing Maryland. There's a lot of storylines going on here as it relates to the Big Red. Penn State is their only loss of the year. They lost in overtime, so they're trying to avenge that loss. If Syracuse wins, it's a huge rivalry. Cornell-Syracuse, going back 50 years. If Maryland prevails, Cornell has the opportunity to avenge the loss in the 2019 national championship when the Terps beat the Big Red. So 2 games on Saturday, finals on Monday.
It's feeling a little like Princess Bride here.
What do you mean?
Well, just avenge the loss, like they're gonna. Anyway, Joshua Altman, by the way, Penn State guy. I grew up a Penn State person. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to see where my loyalties fall on that. But I do also want to give a shout out as
I don't even know you anymore.
I do want to give a shout out to the Wake Forest Demon Deacon men's tennis team, which just recently won a national championship. We don't talk about that much. And so big congratulations. Their program has been very solid over the last few years. So really excited to see that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Listen, let's say goodbye to our audience. Let's say goodbye to each other. Want to thank all of you for listening. If you like what you hear, follow us, share us, subscribe. Send us questions on LinkedIn, X. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again to Josh Altman, director of Earnhardt. Until next week, he's DP. I'm McGhee, and we'll talk soon.